Hey everyone, Nick from the Flex training team here. In the last video on workflow, we touched on the status options available for workflow. In this one, we're going to touch on workflow states and workflow actions. So from the main menu, I'm going to go to projects and scroll all the way down till I find workflow. And then we're going to focus on the quote workflow for this example. In creating a new workflow state, I'm going to go to the bottom left corner where I have the option to add a new workflow state or a new workflow action. So I'm going to create a new workflow state. I'm going to focus on the name and the status for this example. So in the last video, we created a new status called new status, and I'm going to name this one respective to that. You'll also notice on the left in the background here that my workflow states are numbered for the order that they go from one to the next in. This is optional, but it allows you to see the order of your workflow states from top to bottom. Flex automatically orders these alphabetically, and so when we put the numbers before the name, it helps to see them in order. So for this particular example, I'm going to stay between the statuses of inquiry and tentative, and I'm just going to put this one as 1A. And then for my status, I'm going to use the same status that we had created in the last video for new status. Hit OK, and now we have the new status option in here. What makes a workflow state different from a status is that it's more of the foundation of the workflow. The workflow state is where you have the actions available to move from one status to another, while the status, what we generally refer to these states as, is what gives the characteristics to that workflow state. So does it create conflicts? Does it lock the availability? Is it a closed status? Those are the characteristics that we can give to the workflow states by the status. So now that we have that new workflow state in here, I'm going to give a new action to move from one state or status to the next. So down in the plus sign, I'm going to create a new workflow action. And I'm going to call this one move to new status. The confirm screen is simply just a pop-up window that confirms that you've moved from one status to another. I'm going to skip that and leave it off for now. My source state and target state, which are required, as we can see by the red asterisks, are what's telling Flex to move from one state to the next. So in the dropdown, I'm going to tell Flex that I want to move from the inquiry state to the target state of new status. Change to type allows me to change the type of this quote. I like to consider element type sort of a pseudonym. So while we may refer to the quote internally inside of Flex here as a quote, you may decide that once that quote is confirmed, we're now going to call that a contract. Or maybe you want to move from estimate to proposal, things like that. So those different types of names that you can give to this element, you can move from one to the next by using the change to type option in here. And then reset type allows you to reset it to the original element type through a workflow action as well. For example, if I moved from quote to contract, but now I need to reset back to inquiry, I would also want to reset the type so that it's now seen as a quote or a proposal or estimate at that point. A chained parent action in reference to the quote would be referring to a change at the event folder level. So typically our event folder would be a parent element of a quote. And so in triggering this workflow action, do I want to trigger an event folder action? In this instance, again, I'm going to leave that blank. And the same thing happens in relation to children elements as well. So do we want a chained child action of maybe moving a pull sheet to a different status or an invoice to a different status? Those are common children elements of a quote. Moving down the line here, executor groups allows you to select who can run this workflow action. For example, you may want administrators and accounting to maybe approve a quote before it moves into a confirmed status. So if you submit for approval, only these ones can approve or deny that quote. That would be one example of implementing executor groups. Inflow jobs, I sort of generally like to gloss over in training because I always like to refer to the outflow jobs as the actions moving forward. So inflow is typically what's moving from one status into another, while outflow is moving from a status to the next. So I always like to focus on the outflow, as those are the actions moving forward. It's a little easier to comprehend in moving from one step to the next. So these are typically going to be email notifications to let somebody know that the job has been confirmed, maybe it's been canceled, but you also have the option of other actions as well, such as financial document generators, equipment list generators. You can even export documents such as a QuickBooks export. Those are all examples of outflow jobs that you may put into place there. So with that, I'm going to hit OK. And we can see our new action to move from the inquiry status to that new status here. Additionally, we're going to want a way to get out of that new status. So I might want to put a reset into place to move back to the inquiry status, or a way to move forward. I may want to move to the tentative status, or maybe skip over that and move to the confirmed status. So I'll add a new workflow action in here in order to do that. So we'll call this set to tentative to go from the source state of new status to the target state of tentative. Hit OK. And now we have that action to move forward. If you need to delete an action, you can double click into the workflow state, and that can be anywhere in this blank space here. And that pulls up this workflow state settings. So we have the general settings, which brings you back to the naming, changing the status, things like that. The description you could even use as just an internal note to let yourself know what may happen at this phase. Maybe it needs to be submitted for approval, things like that. And again, inflow actions are what brings you into this workflow state. So resetting from inquiry from the source state of canceled will bring you to that target state. You'll notice all the target states here are inquiry. These are the inflow actions that will move you to that status. While the outflow actions all have the source state of inquiry to say, here's where your target state is from here. So if I want to delete an action, maybe the move to new status one that I just created, I would check that and hit the delete button at the bottom. I'm going to leave it for now, just to walk through a quick example in a quote. So we start in that initial state of inquiry. And then in my workflow, I can see the option to move to new status. If I want this action to be somewhere else in the list here, I can do that in the workflow settings. In the Outflow Actions tab, we can drag and drop this to move it wherever we'd like. If you have the quote already open, reload, and we'll see that update take place here. Move to new status. Now we're in the new status state here, where my workflow action changes to the only option that I have available here for set to tentative. In the next video, we'll go into workflow jobs and what features are available there.